Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the program. I'm Jeff, otherwise known as the Economic Prepper, and I've got a few things to talk about today. We're going to talk about gold, silver, the dollar, Bitcoin, how we got to where we are, why I'm not wearing my Bitcoin hat, what this symbol represents, all that good stuff in 10 minutes or less. That's the goal. So, again, my name is Jeff. I'm the Economic Prepper. Thanks for joining me. How did I start to become the Economic Prepper? Well, originally I had a Bitcoin, or actually a Litecoin name. I had a crypto name, but now I moved on to the Economic Prepper because what I learned throughout my journey of learning about the history of money, how this came to be, the history of all that, why we left gold and silver, why we need to go back to things like this, and how we get to, reaching for it, Bitcoin. All right, now that's probably a good screen grab right there if you want. But Bitcoin, I couldn't find the Bitcoin hat, but what I was able to find today was my Stock Pulse hat. And hat tip to Scott there. They were sponsors of the Silver Symposium about a year and a half ago when I was there, and one of the speakers with Andy Sheckman was there. Jack from Nobody Special Finance was there. A lot of good speakers were there. Economic Ninja was there. And but the keynote speaker was G. Edward Griffin, who wrote Creature from Jekyll Island, which is basically the history of the Federal Reserve and how it came to be. And he's been a big proponent of ending the Fed and why we need to get off of that system, that financial system, and into asset-backed currency and asset-backed money system once again. So as I went down all these different rabbit holes throughout my education of myself on Bitcoin, I learned about what is money? Why did gold become money? Why did we used to use shells, or we used shark teeth, use different things, clay tablets to keep track of money exchanges and value, what the purpose of money was, how it all came to be. And that's just learning about money in general before you start to pick silver, gold, Bitcoin, what are the right things to use as money. So that's just part of the process. But as I went down that journey, I started like, why are all these people that are into Bitcoin also like silver, or they like gold, or there's this debate between gold and silver people? What is all that about? So I dug into it and I understood that the purpose of money is to store value and create a medium of exchange. And that's the two things. And that's still a debate today. I see Jack, Jack, I'm going to get it wrong. I think it's Dorsey. I think it's right. Leave a comment down below. But Jack, who started Twitter, he started Nostr. Now he's on to his next thing. I can't even remember what this one is. I think it's BitHash or BitConnect or not BitConnect. That was a scam. But some kind of bit thing where you can do point to point. There's debates of what the purpose of money. Is it means of exchange, a peer-to-peer? Is it a store of value? There's lots to consider. But what I noticed is that when I talked to a gold person, a silver person, a Bitcoiner, I try to focus on the commonalities versus the differences, okay? And one common theme is that this stuff right here, this Federal Reserve note dollar, which isn't a dollar, not according by the Coinage Act of 1792, that's supposed to be a certain amount of silver or gold. So this stuff should comprise a real dollar, not a piece of paper. That was part of the problem that our founders had, because they wanted to tax us. And you remember that Boston Tea Party, taxation without representation? All came from that in Britain. That was where it was. But now we have a dollar, and we have a central bank for the third time in this country, where this is backed by nothing since 1971. So the question that's often debated about, kicked about, talked about online, on Twitter, where I'm very active now these days, on YouTube as well, and even in these debates. And part of the reason I became the Economic Prepper is that I focused on the commonalities. People that like gold hated the dollar. People like silver hated the dollar. People that went for Bitcoin hated the dollar. So there's all the commonality that the dollar, the fiat system, because the government says it's worth something, that's garbage, okay? It's not real value. Just think about throughout history. Think of any historical movie you've ever watched where somebody conquered somebody else. Did they take the government's pieces of paper, or did they take the actual gold? They take they take the paintings, they take the artwork, they take the gold and the silver and the jewelry, whatever they perceive as valuable assets. That's what they take, okay? So that is what our money should be founded upon. The question is now the mechanism of how how do we get back onto a standard where we're backing our currency with an asset so that the currency can actually represent money again? Because right now it doesn't. It holds value over time. That's part of the properties of money. If your money is losing value over time, like this thing is, and we've seen that happen last 5 years rapidly, because this is now worth about this in about 5 years. So you need two of these things to equal what you used to buy for $1. How do we get there? How do we get back to where we've got either silver or gold or the Bitcoin pillow who flew too far away for me to reach right now? How do we get back on those things to represent our money or be representative of currency so that we can hold value over time? Well, the way that we have to do that is we have to phase it in. You can't just launch something and just say tomorrow, boom, this is going to be where it's at, because it's not it's not an equitable solution. So if somebody has $10,000 in the bank today and someone has zero, and that person that was zero has $10,000 of debt, if you change the valuations overnight, it's not going to be equitable because everybody's in a different monetary situation. A lot of people are in debt. Some people have savings. Some people are saved in the dollar. Some people are saved in gold. Some have Bitcoin. What's fair? The fair thing to do is to have a phased approach. And what that is that's where I'm getting back to taking this and backing it with this. Okay? How do you reverse the creation of a fiat currency? Hard to do. I'm not sure if it's ever been attempted, but the way that you're going to do it, the way I believe that it's going to happen in the United States is they're going to launch the $50-year gold bond. And what that's going to do is that bond will have a cash value. It'll be represented by a certain number of these things. Okay? What's going to happen is that a bond, it matures over time, and it's worth something over time. So in 50 years, if I buy, let's just say I have $100, right? If I buy $100 worth of that bond today, it might be discounted to a certain amount because it's worth $100 50 years from now. But what is $100 today, or what is $100 50 years from now worth today, right? That's kind of like you have to do the calculation. Well, if you say, just imagine I'm going to buy gold instead, right? And that's what a lot of people are doing because they don't trust the dollar. So they buy gold instead because this is going to have this purchasing power hold up much better than the dollar has. Just look at the price of gold for the last 5 years, basically doubled. So if you were to be able to create something where in the future I knew I could get a certain amount of gold, and we have a certain amount of gold that we know in aggregate, we know how much we have, but we say, let's say in 50 years, I want it to be worth $100 trillion. Well, today, roughly, if you believe the numbers of Fort Knox, and we got to audit that too, in order to put out a plan, you got to know what you have to work with. The 261 million ounces, I believe, is the number that we have. Do the math at about $3,750 worth of an ounce of gold. It's about $1 trillion worth of gold in the U.S. and Fort Knox and other locations. So how do we get from 1 trillion to 100 trillion? Well, about a 10% growth rate, what they call a CAGR, or it's not a frat party, but I'm talking about a compound annual growth rate. Getting 10% a year for 50 years. You get from 1 trillion, you get to about 100 trillion. So if I gave you and said, okay, I'm going to give you a portion of gold in 50 years, it's going to cost you, let's just say, I'll give you an ounce of gold 50 years from now. At that point in time, that will be worth 1 out of 261 million ounces, and it'll be worth 100 times what it is today. What would you pay for it now? Well, the answer would probably be about the price of an ounce of gold now. So this dollar, let's just say this dollar becomes a $3,000 or $4,000 bill. So it represents an ounce of gold today. But in the future, it'll get that ounce of gold in 50 years. So that's where you're creating a currency that you can create the bond, and you have it backed by a certain amount of gold. And what that amount of gold is going to vary based on the denomination of the bond. But let's just say that in the future, we are planning to have $100 trillion of value in the country in 50 years. The bonds will be priced at $1 trillion right now to buy the representation of that gold. You could exchange it in 50 years for the gold in Fort Knox and other places. So now you've got bonds that have a face value of $100 trillion that you could buy for $1 trillion today. There's going to be tricks and games played about who's going to accept that and who creates that bond, but that is how you start to phase in and get away from a fiat system backed by nothing, by saying, would you rather have this version of the dollar or one that has some of this behind it, and you get this in 50 years? That is going to be a step in the right direction. That is probably where we're heading, and I have lots more videos I could talk about this. Please leave questions down below that I can answer in follow-on videos. I'm already at 10 minutes, but one question I will answer right now: how do we get from gold to Bitcoin? Well, over those 50 years, people will realize that gold is good money, but Bitcoin's even better. And then we'll start to phase that in. Plus, over those 50 years, people that have been in Bitcoin for a while will start to have much more of a voice over that time frame. So it kind of creates an event horizon of 50 years from now, in the year 2076, when the country turns 300 years old, because this bond is going to be launched when it's 250 years old, because we turned 250 in July 4th, 2026. That's the whole concept behind this. So we're going to launch that next summer. You can buy that bond. 50 years from now, it'll be worth a certain amount of gold, but maybe somewhere down the line, it'll be exchangeable for Bitcoin too, or silver, or some other asset, because it'll be priced in the marketplace. But in order for us to get away from a fiat system where we're just printing these as many as we can and then just throwing them wherever we need them, let's get back to a real system backed by real assets and move towards better and better assets. And then we can start to have the conversation of what's the best asset to back our money or use as our money. So, lot said. I've already broken the 10-minute rule. Share your thoughts, leave a comment down below, and I'll catch the next video. And have a good Labor Day as well if you're still at the end of the video. To give me a hashtag Labor Day at the end if you made it already at the end of the video. Talk to you soon. Take care.